I never thought I would be the guy posting about his wife on Reddit, but here we are. My wife turned her phone location off for one weekend. She came home with a new story every hour. At first I thought I was just being paranoid, like maybe she wanted privacy or her battery was dying. But that weekend changed everything, and it reminded me of another story I came across a while back. A story about a coworker who took video of me outside of work to prove I wasn't disabled. That's where I need to start because that was the first time I realized how far people will go to twist what they see. Let me back up. I have a condition called chronic pain. I know that sounds vague, but it's very real. Imagine normal people wake up at a pain level of maybe 2 or 3 out of 10. I wake up at a 6. That feels like you've pulled a muscle and it aches every time you move. Some days it's worse, some days I get lucky and it's a 4. I use canes on days when I'm at a 7 or above. I have all the paperwork filed at my job for accommodations, a handicap placard on my car, the whole deal. I work a full-time job and a part-time job because staying busy helps my anxiety and I like the extra money. I was recently moved to a new location closer to home and I loved the new team. My boss Amy was fantastic. My colleague Casey and I were both assistant coordinators, but Casey had been pushing for a promotion for a long time. Everyone knew it. I was open that I didn't want that promotion because I already had a full-time job, so we worked side by side and things were fine for a while. Then came a Sunday when my pain spiked to an 8. I had to use my cane. I went to the grocery store after work, parked in a handicapped spot like I always do, and walked inside leaning on my cane. It was nothing unusual for me. But the next day at work, Casey was acting weird. She kept staring at me, making little comments like, "You seemed fine yesterday, and I saw you walking around the store without any trouble." I brushed it off because I don't owe anyone an explanation. Later that week, I found out Casey had followed me to the grocery store on that Sunday. She took video of me from inside the store from a distance, and she showed it to Amy. She said the video proved I was faking my disability because I walked normally for a few steps while reaching for a box on a shelf. Never mind that I had my cane in the cart. Never mind that I was clearly favoring one leg. She had her proof. I was livid. I talked to Amy, who was sympathetic but said she couldn't do much unless there was a pattern. Casey kept doing it. She started parking near my car to see if I used the handicap placard. She took more videos. She even followed me to a different store one evening. I felt like I was being stalked. I went to HR. They said it was a workplace conflict and recommended we have a mediation. Casey agreed, and in that mediation she said she was just looking out for the company because people who fake disabilities cost everyone money. I sat there with my medical records in my bag and my cane leaning against the chair. I didn't scream, I just said, "I have a diagnosed condition. You have no right to film me." But she didn't care. That weekend, I decided to go to the police. I filed a report for harassment and stalking. The officer looked at me like I was wasting his time. He said, "She took a video in a public place. That's not illegal." I said it was the repeated following, the surveillance. He shrugged and said I could try a restraining order, but it probably wouldn't go anywhere. I came home and my wife asked how it went. I told her. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "That's exactly the kind of thing that makes people lose trust." And that's when she told me she had turned off her phone location that weekend because she wanted to go visit her sister without me tracking her. I thought I was overreacting, but now I wasn't so sure. That night I opened Reddit and started typing. I needed to know if I was crazy for going as far as I did. The responses were mixed, but a lot of people told me to keep fighting, and then something happened that I didn't expect. Casey started sending me texts, screenshots of my Reddit post. She said, "You think you're a victim? Wait till HR sees this." I felt sick. I didn't respond. I just printed everything and took it to a lawyer. The lawyer said I had a case for invasion of privacy and hostile work environment. That was the first time I felt like I might win, but the process dragged on for months. Casey kept showing up at my work, taking more videos, and HR did nothing. I documented every single incident. The date, the time, what I was doing, what she said. I filled notebooks. My wife became my rock through all of it, but that weekend she turned off her location. It cracked something between us. She came home with stories about her sister's new job, her nephew's soccer game, a funny thing that happened at the mall. Every hour there was a new story, but never an explanation for why she had to turn off the location. Never a straight answer. And I started wondering if maybe I was the one being paranoid or if she was hiding something too. That's when everything changed. I got a call from the lawyer. He said Casey had been fired. Another coworker came forward with evidence that she had been tampering with company records. The video stalking thing was just the tip of the iceberg. I felt relieved but also hollow, because now I had this other mystery to solve and I didn't know if I had the strength to go through it again. So I decided to tell the whole story from the beginning. The coworker, the videos, the police, the lawyer. And then the wife who disappeared for a weekend and came back with a story every hour. I'm not sure where it will end, but I know I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I remember reading another story around that time that made me feel less alone. It was about a girl, 21, living in a 2-bedroom flat with a roommate, also 22. They'd been together for just over a year, splitting rent and bills evenly, friendly but not close. It was working. Then the roommate started dating this guy, 24. At first, he was over once or twice a week. Within 6 months, he was there 5 or 6 nights a week, sometimes full weeks straight. Not on the lease, didn't pay rent, didn't bring groceries, didn't help with anything. The girl didn't say much at first, she didn't want drama. But what got under her skin was the shower thing. He showered all the time, twice a day minimum, sometimes more. And every time he used her stuff. Her shampoo, conditioner, face wash, razor, deodorant. She noticed because the bottle levels dropped and the razor was wet. She didn't say anything the first few times, figured maybe the roommate let him borrow something once. But it kept happening. So she moved all her toiletries into her bedroom and carried them back and forth like she was at a summer camp. She finally brought it up to her roommate. The roommate just said he probably didn't realize and did nothing. A week later she tried again, more direct. She said she wasn't comfortable with him showering there constantly, especially since he didn't live there, didn't contribute, and used her stuff. She said she'd feel different if he at least bought his own products or chipped in somehow. The roommate got super defensive, accused her of being controlling, of trying to ruin her relationship. Said her boyfriend had a sensitive skin condition and couldn't use random cheap brands. The girl said then he can buy his own sensitive skin stuff. The roommate stormed off. Things got tense. The boyfriend started spending even more time there. He'd leave wet towels on the floor, use the last of the hot water, and once she found her razor in the shower with hair stuck in it. That was the final straw. She told the roommate he can't shower here anymore, period. The roommate called her a bitch and said she was being unreasonable. The girl stood her ground. Then the roommate's boyfriend started getting weird. He'd glare at her in the hallway. He'd make comments under his breath. One night she came home from work and found the bathroom door locked. She waited 20 minutes. He came out still shirtless and said nothing. She went in and saw her razor was missing. She looked everywhere. It never turned up. A few days later she noticed a strange smell in the apartment. Chemical, sweet. She thought maybe it was a cleaning product, but it got stronger. Her roommate started acting jumpy, closing doors fast, taking calls outside. The boyfriend showed up at odd hours with people who didn't linger. One morning the girl found a small baggie behind the toilet when she was cleaning. It had white residue. Her stomach dropped. She didn't confront them. She called her mom, who told her to get out. She started looking for a new place. But she also went to the landlord and explained the situation: unregistered tenant, possible drug activity. The landlord said he'd investigate. That night the roommate pounded on her door. "Did you call the landlord?" The girl said yes. The roommate screamed that she'd ruined everything. The boyfriend came up behind her dead-eyed and said, "You're going to regret this." The girl didn't sleep that night. She locked her door and put a chair under the knob. She called the non-emergency police line and said she suspected drug dealing. They said they'd send a car. She waited. Nothing came. The next morning she told her boss she needed a few days off. She packed a bag and stayed at a friend's place. While she was gone, the landlord did an inspection. He found scales, baggies, and a small amount of meth. He called the cops. The boyfriend was arrested. The roommate claimed she didn't know, but the police found texts. She was charged with possession with intent to distribute. Both were evicted. The girl moved back in after the apartment was cleaned. She got new locks. She changed the Wi-Fi password. She felt safe again, but it took months. She said the worst part wasn't the drug stuff. It was how the roommate threw away a good living situation for a guy who didn't even buy his own shampoo. She said she'd never ignore her gut again. That story hit me hard because it was about boundaries. Someone pushes, you push back, and then the whole thing explodes. I thought about my own situation, Casey filming me, my wife turning off her location. Maybe I was the roommate in someone else's story. Maybe I was the one not seeing what was right in front of me. I didn't know, but I started paying closer attention. I started writing things down, dates, times, what she said, what I said, and I waited for the next crack to form. I started paying closer attention. I wrote down everything. Monday morning, she said she was going to grab coffee with a friend from college. I asked which friend. She hesitated, then named someone I'd never heard of. That night, I checked the mileage on her car. It was 30 miles higher than it should have been for a coffee run across town. I didn't say anything. Tuesday, she came home late, said she stopped at the grocery store. There were no bags. She said she forgot her wallet. I looked in the trash for any receipt. Nothing. Wednesday, I came home early. She was on the phone in the bedroom, voice low. She ended the call when she heard me. I asked who it was. She said her sister. I called her sister later that night, casual, asked if they'd talked. Her sister said they hadn't spoken in over a week. That was when everything changed. I knew I wasn't overreacting. Thursday morning, I sat her down at the kitchen table. I said, "I need you to tell me the truth about that weekend, the one you turned your location off." She stared at her coffee mug. "I already told you I visited Jen." "You didn't," I said. "I called Jen. She said you never showed up." The color drained from her face. She didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and showed her the mileage log I'd been keeping. The receipts I'd found in her glove compartment from a gas station 40 miles south of her sister's place. A hotel receipt from a motel I'd never heard of. She started crying. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me with what?" She told me she'd been meeting a friend from work, a guy she'd known before we got married. They'd been texting for months. Nothing physical, she swore, but she needed to see him in person to figure out if she still had feelings. She turned off her location because she didn't want me to see her drive to his town. The stories she told me that whole weekend were rehearsed. She practiced them in her head. I didn't scream, I just sat there. The kitchen clock ticked. The coffee went cold. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Because I didn't know what I wanted and I didn't want to lose you if it turned out to be nothing. But you did lose me, I said. Maybe not completely, but you did. She asked if I wanted a divorce. I said I didn't know. I said I needed space. That night I slept on the couch. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Casey, the coworker who filmed me, about the roommate who let her boyfriend ruin everything. About how people will cross every line if you let them. I thought I'd been strong with Casey, going to the lawyer, documenting everything. But with my wife, I didn't have a case to bring. There was no HR, no police, no lawyer, just trust, and it was cracked. The next week I stayed at a friend's place. We texted brief and cold. She said she was sorry. She said she ended things with the coworker. She said she wanted to try counseling. I told her I needed to think. I remembered the girl from the roommate story. She said she'd never ignore her gut again. I wish I'd listened to mine sooner. The weekend she turned off her location, I felt it in my chest. Something wrong, but I talked myself out of it. I told myself I was being paranoid because of the Casey situation. I told myself I owed her trust. The hardest part was knowing that the whole time I was fighting Casey, fighting HR, fighting for my dignity at work, she was off in some motel having coffee with another man. Not even sex, she claimed. But the lying, the planning, the stories, that cut deeper than anything Casey ever did. I started going to therapy myself. I told the therapist everything: the disabled parking placard, the videos, the police who did nothing, the lawyer who finally helped, the wife who disappeared and came back with a new story every hour. The therapist said, "You've been fighting on two fronts. You need to decide which one you can win." I knew what she meant. The work situation was resolved. Casey was fired, the lawsuit was settled, I had a written apology from HR and a small payout. That chapter was closed. But the wife chapter was still open, and it was eating me alive. 2 weeks after I moved back in, I found an old notebook in the garage. It was mine from the Casey stuff, filled with dates and times and phone calls. I flipped through it. On the same weekend she turned off her location, I had written, "Wife gone to Gen S, feels off, ask about it later." But I never asked. I was too busy handling the Casey mess. I prioritized the wrong crisis. I texted her from the living room while she was in the shower. "Can we talk tonight, for real?" She replied, "Yes, I'll make dinner." That night she made spaghetti, my favorite. We sat down at the same table where she'd confessed. She looked tired, I looked worse. I said I want to try counseling, but I need you to understand that trust doesn't come back just because you say sorry. It takes months, years, and you have to earn it every single day. She nodded. "I know, I'll do whatever it takes. You have to stop lying about everything, even the small things, even if you think it'll protect me." She reached across the table. I took her hand. It was cold. I didn't feel relief. I felt like I was standing on a bridge that had been burned halfway, and we were trying to rebuild it plank by plank, not knowing if the other side still existed. We started counseling the following week. The counselor asked us to share our versions of that weekend. She told her story: the drive, the coffee shop, the talk, the decision not to cross a physical line. She cried. I didn't. I told my version: the sinking feeling when I saw the location was off, the dread when she came home with rehearsed stories, the months of silence. The counselor said, "You both have work to do, the breach is real, but it's not necessarily fatal if you're both willing." I wanted to be willing. Part of me still loved her, part of me wanted to believe. But every time she said, "I love you now," I heard the rehearsed stories. Every time she said she was going to the store, I checked the mileage. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. A month later, I found another old notebook. This time it was hers, shoved in a drawer in the nightstand. I didn't mean to find it. I was looking for a pen. It fell open to a page from that weekend. In her handwriting, bullet points: 8, coffee, talk about feelings; 10:30, walk in the park; 12, lunch. He held my hand; 3, back to his place, just talked; 6, drove home; practice stories. I closed the notebook. I put it back. I didn't confront her, because I realized the real story wasn't that weekend. It was everything after, and I wasn't sure we were still writing the same book. That same week, another story came back to me. A girl I'd read about online, someone whose life got hijacked by a roommate's boyfriend. I thought about her situation while I sat in my car after therapy, holding the notebook with my wife's handwriting. Different story, same rotting feeling, someone crossing a line, and the person who should have had your back just stood there. I remembered her post. She was 21, living in a 2-bedroom flat with a roommate she'd known for a little over a year. They split rent and bills evenly, friendly but not close. Respectful, normal, until the boyfriend showed up. She said he was around once or twice a week at first, then it became 5 or 6 nights a week, sometimes full weeks in a row. He wasn't on the lease. Didn't pay a dime, didn't bring groceries, didn't clean, didn't even buy a six-pack. Just existed in their space like he owned it. The thing that finally broke her was the showering. He'd take 2 showers a day minimum, sometimes 3, and every single time he used her stuff. Her shampoo, her conditioner, her face wash, her razor, her deodorant. She said she noticed the deodorant stick was wet and smelled like him. That's when she started carrying all her toiletries into her room like she was living in a dorm again. She brought it up to her roommate. Her roommate just said he probably didn't realize. And then did nothing. That's the part that stuck with me: the deflection, the denial, the silent permission. She tried again a week later, more direct this time. She said she wasn't comfortable with him showering there constantly, especially since he contributed nothing and used her personal items. She said she'd feel different if he bought his own stuff or chipped in for the water bill. Her roommate got defensive, said she was being controlling, that he was going through a rough patch, that he had a skin condition that required frequent showers. She said, "He's just trying to stay clean. Why are you making this about money?" The girl didn't yell. She just said he can stay clean with his own towel and his own razor. Her roommate rolled her eyes and walked away. Things got worse. The boyfriend started staying over even more. He would show up with a duffel bag and leave it in the living room. He started eating their food without asking. He sometimes walked around the flat in just his boxers. She felt like a guest in her own home. She started locking her bedroom door at night. Then the smell started, not BO, something else. Chemical, sweet like burnt plastic and vanilla. She found a strange cigarette butt in the bathroom trash, then a foil wrapper with a burned edge. She recognized it from a documentary she'd watched in college. Heroin. She didn't confront them directly. She started checking her credit card statements because he'd once asked to borrow her laptop to print something. She found a $300 charge to an electronics store she'd never visited. She told her roommate her card must have been stolen. Her roommate said, "That's weird, maybe you lost it." No apology, no offer to help. That was the night she called me. Well, not me, she called the police. Non-emergency line. She asked an officer to do a welfare check on her roommate, said she was worried about drug use in the apartment. The officer came, talked to the roommate and the boyfriend, found nothing illegal in plain sight. But the officer pulled her aside and said, "You need to get out of that lease, this guy has priors." She found out from the officer that the boyfriend had a record for possession with intent to distribute. He'd done 18 months in county and was on probation. His probation officer had no idea he'd moved in with a girlfriend in a different city. She went back inside and told her roommate everything she'd learned. Her roommate went white. She said, "He told me he was clean. He said he was just on probation for a mistake he made when he was 21. He's 24 now," the girl said, "and he's using in our bathroom." Her roommate started crying, not angry crying, scared crying. She admitted she'd known something was off. She'd found a needle in his jacket pocket last week, but he told her it was an old one. She wanted to believe him. She wanted so badly to be loved that she ignored every red flag. The girl gave her roommate two options. Either the boyfriend leaves for good within 48 hours or she calls the landlord and reports the lease violation. Her roommate begged for more time. The girl said no. 48 hours came and went. The boyfriend was still there. She called the landlord. She documented everything: the overnight stays, the drug paraphernalia, the credit card fraud, the police report number. The landlord gave her roommate a 15-day notice to vacate. Her roommate started screaming at her, called her a backstabber, said she ruined her life. The girl just packed her valuables and stayed at a friend's house until the roommate moved out. 3 weeks later, the apartment was empty except for her bedroom. She changed the locks. She never spoke to her roommate again. A month after the move-out, she got a call from a detective. The boyfriend had been arrested for a home invasion in the next county. He'd broken into a house while the family was on vacation. Her roommate was listed as his emergency contact. The detective asked if she had any information. She gave him everything. The last thing she wrote in her update was, "My gut told me this guy was bad from the start. I ignored it because I didn't want to be the difficult roommate. Now I'm the one who paid the price. My credit is wrecked because he used my laptop. My peace is gone, and I learned that being polite doesn't protect you. Saying no does." I read that update the night I found my wife's notebook. And I realized, sitting there in my garage with the cardboard smell and the dusty floor, that I'd been doing the exact same thing, being polite, waiting for proof, hoping the person I loved would just stop. But Jessica didn't stop. She just got better at telling stories. I closed the notebook and put it back in her nightstand drawer. I didn't confront her about the bullet points. I didn't tell her I'd seen the list. Because I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about that weekend anymore. It was about whether I could live with the version of our marriage that came after. The roommate story ended with someone leaving a lease. Mine was going to end with me leaving a marriage. That was the night I started seeing my marriage for what it was, a performance. She rehearsed her lines, I played my part, and the audience, our friends, our families, they clapped along. But backstage, the set was falling apart. I didn't confront her about the notebook. I just started making plans. Quiet ones. Like the girl in that apartment who packed her valuables and left before the lease even expired. I started separating our bank accounts. I called a lawyer. I told him I needed to know what a fair divorce looked like in our state. He asked if there was abuse. I said no. He asked if there was infidelity. I said I didn't know, but I knew there was lying. He said that was often worse. I was sitting in my car after that call when I saw a story pop up on my phone, a woman in Texas. Same feeling I'd had with the roommate story, that sinking recognition. Her post started with 3 words, "This is weird." She said she was a part-time assistant coordinator at a place she actually liked. She had a chronic pain condition. The way she explained it was simple. Normal people wake up at a pain level of 2 or 3, maybe a 4 on a bad day. She woke up at a 6 every single day, like pulling a muscle and having it ache every time you move. She used canes on days she hit a 7 or above. She had a handicap placard. She had a disabled parking permit. She had all the paperwork filed with HR, so her employer knew she might need accommodations. She worked under a boss named Amy who was great. and she worked alongside a guy named Casey, who was the same position as her assistant coordinator. Casey had wanted a promotion for years. Everyone knew it. She was open that she didn't want one. Her part-time job was just that part-time. She already had a full-time job doing something else. She did this one to pad savings and keep busy because staying busy helped her anxiety. She said she and Casey got along okay. Not friends, not enemies, just coworkers. Then one Sunday she had a bad pain day, a 7 or 8. She used her cane. She used her handicap placard. She parked close to the building. She went in, did her shift, went home, nothing unusual. The next day, Casey called a meeting with Amy. He said he had something to show her, a video. He'd filmed her outside the building on Sunday. He de-followed her from her car to the entrance. He zoomed in on her walking. He claimed the video proved she wasn't really disabled. He said she was faking, that she walked normally for someone who wasn't in pain, that she only used the cane when people were watching. That she was committing fraud to get preferential treatment. She said she sat in that meeting and didn't say a word. She just stared at Casey while he played the video on his phone. Amy watched it. Then Amy looked at Casey and asked, "Did you drive to this location to film her?" Casey said he was in the area. Amy said, "You were in the area on a Sunday when neither of us works," Casey stammered. Amy took his phone and said, "I'm keeping this until HR gets here." The OOP said she went home that night and cried, not because of the video, because of the way Casey looked at her, like she was a liar, like her pain was a performance. She said she'd spent years explaining her condition to family, friends, doctors. She de-learned to smile through the ache. She de-learned to stand up straight on days she wanted to curl into a ball, because if she showed the pain, people treated her like glass. If she hid it, people treated her like a fraud. There was no winning. HR got involved. Casey was written up for harassment and for violating workplace policy about recording coworkers. But that wasn't the end of it. The next week, she started getting weird looks from other employees. Someone left a note on her desk that just said "faker" in block letters. She reported it. No cameras in that section of the office. Then she got a call from the police. Casey had filed a report with the local department. He'd claimed she was using the handicap placard fraudulently. The police ran her plates. They saw her valid disabled registration. They called her to confirm everything was in order. She said yes, it was. The officer said, "We have a complaint that says you're not actually disabled. Can you provide medical documentation?" She said, "I have it on file with my employer. I can send it to you." The officer said that would help. She sent them a letter from her specialist, the placard registration, and a copy of her HR accommodation file. She thought it was over. It was. Casey started showing up at places she frequented, the grocery store near her house, the gas station, the coffee shop she went to on Saturday mornings. He'd sit in his car and film her. She noticed because he drove a red pickup. Hard to miss. She started looking over her shoulder every time she got out of the car. She went back to Amy and said, "This is stalking." Amy called corporate security. They told Casey to stop contacting her outside of work. Casey told them he had a right to be in public places. He said she was just paranoid. Then one day she came out of the grocery store and found a flyer on her windshield. It had her photo printed on it, a still from one of the videos Casey took with the words "fake handicap scammer" and her license plate number. She stood in the parking lot with that flyer in her hand and felt the world tilt. Someone had printed this. Someone had walked through a parking lot putting it on cars. Someone had decided she was a target. She called the police again. She showed them the flyer. She told them about the videos, the notes, the red pickup. The officer took a report but said, "We don't have enough to press charges for stalking. It's mostly just him recording you in public. That's legal. The flyer might be defamation, but that's civil." She asked, "What about the fact that he followed me to the grocery store?" The officer said, "You don't know for sure he followed you. You just saw him there." She said, "He's at the same grocery store every time I shop at the same time." The officer shrugged. She hung up and called her lawyer. The same lawyer I'd called 2 days earlier about my marriage. Different city, same feeling. No one was going to save her except herself. She went to the police station in person. She demanded to file a formal complaint. She sat in a plastic chair for 2 hours before someone took her statement. She gave them the flyer, the notes, the video evidence from Casey's own phone that Amy had saved. She gave them the names of every witness. She told them Casey was angry about a promotion she didn't even want. She said, "I'm disabled, I have papers, I have doctors, I have a placard. He is harassing me because he thinks I'm lying. And I am done being polite about it." The officer wrote it all down. He said, "We'll look into it." She drove home shaking. She posted an update that night. She said, "I am black, I am disabled, I live in Texas, and I have done everything right. I have the paperwork, I have the doctors, I have the laws on my side, but none of that matters if the system treats me like a nuisance. Casey is not just ableist, he is a stalker, and no one wants to call it what it is." She ended the post with 3 words, "I am exhausted." I read that story and I thought about Jessica, about the bullet points in her notebook, about the way she rehearsed her stories like they were lines in a play. About the weekend she turned off her location and came back with explanations that felt too clean, too practiced. I thought about the flyer on that woman's windshield, how someone had reduced her whole medical history to a lie because it was easier to believe she was faking than to admit he was wrong. I wasn't being stalked, I wasn't being filmed, but I was being lied to, and the lie was so smooth, so carefully constructed that I'd almost convinced myself it was true, that Jessica just needed space. I was being paranoid that good marriages survive rough patches, but rough patches don't come with bullet-pointed scripts. Rough patches don't require you to rehearse your alibi over coffee with a man you told your husband was just a friend. I went back inside. Jessica was in the kitchen making dinner. She was humming. She looked happy. She looked normal. Hey, she said, you were in the car a while. Everything okay? I said, yeah, just a long call with my lawyer. She stopped stirring the sauce. Your lawyer. Business stuff, I said, nothing to worry about. She looked at me for a second, then she smiled and turned back to the stove. I sat down at the kitchen table and watched her cook. She moved around the kitchen like she owned it, like she belonged, like nothing was wrong. And I realized that was the scariest part. She wasn't nervous, she wasn't guilty, she was just comfortable because she thought she'd gotten away with it. I'd read that roommate's story, I'd read the disabled woman's story. Both of them had one thing in common. The moment they stopped being polite, the truth came out. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, but it was real. And I was ready for real. I remembered another story I'd come across that week, a post from a 21-year-old woman about her roommate's boyfriend. It started with a razor and ended with a warrant. She said she lived in a two-bedroom flat with a girl she'd known for about a year. They weren't best friends, but they got along, split rent and bills evenly, respect each other's space. It was fine until her roommate started dating this guy. He was 24, worked construction, had a truck. At first, he was over once or twice a week. Then it became 5 or 6 nights, then full weeks at a time. He wasn't on the lease, he didn't pay rent, didn't bring groceries. Didn't chip in for anything, and he showered constantly, twice a day minimum. Sometimes 3 times. She said she noticed her shampoo bottle getting low, her conditioner, her face wash. Then her razor started going dull way too fast. She found her deodorant stick wet. She knew he was using her stuff. She moved everything into her bedroom and carried it back and forth like she was at a campsite. She told her roommate about it politely. The roommate said, oh, he probably didn't realize. And did nothing. After a few weeks, she got fed up. She sat her roommate down and said, I'm not comfortable with him showering here all the time, especially since he uses my products. If he bought his own stuff or helped with bills, I'd feel different. The roommate got defensive, said she was being controlling, said he had a right to be comfortable, said it was her apartment too. That's when things started to feel off. The boyfriend started giving her dirty looks. He'd be in the living room when she came home and he wouldn't say hi, he'd just stare. She began to notice he was always sweating. Even after a shower, his face would be clammy. He lost weight. His eyes looked sunken. She found a small baggie in the bathroom trash. White residue. She didn't touch it. She took a photo. She went to her landlord, told them the boyfriend was essentially living there without being on the lease. The landlord sent a notice that only the 2 tenants could stay overnight more than 3 times a week. The roommate didn't care. The boyfriend stayed anyway. One night she came home and found the locks had been changed. She had to call a locksmith. Her roommate said it was a mistake. But the boyfriend was smirking. She filed a complaint with the police. She showed them the photo of the baggie. She said she was scared. The officer took a report but said there wasn't enough for a search warrant. She felt helpless. Then one night she was in her room and heard shouting. Her roommate and the boyfriend were fighting, then a crash. She cracked her door and saw the boyfriend holding a knife, not threatening her roommate, just holding it like it was normal. She called 911. The cops came. The boyfriend had a warrant out for drug possession. They arrested him. The roommate screamed at her, said she ruined everything. After that, the roommate moved out, broke the lease. Left the apartment a mess. The OOP had to clean up, pay for new locks, and deal with the fallout. But she said she felt safe for the first time in months. She never found out if the boyfriend was dealing, but the baggie and the sweating and the behavior all pointed to something. She posted an update saying she'd learned to trust her gut, that sharing a razor with a stranger was the least of her problems. I put down my phone after reading that story. Jessica was still humming in the kitchen. I thought about how that woman had to fight just to have her own shower back, how she had to call the cops to get rid of a guy who wasn't even on the lease. And here I was, afraid to ask my wife a simple question. I stood up, walked into the kitchen. Jessica had her back to me, stirring the sauce. I said her name. She didn't turn around. Jessica. Yeah, I need to know about the weekend you turned off your location. She stopped stirring. The kitchen went quiet except for the bubbling pot. She turned around slowly. Her face was blank, not guilty, not angry, just careful. We talked about this, she said. I was at a friend's. Which friend? Karen. Karen's husband told me you weren't there. She blinked, a tiny crack in the mask. Maybe I got the name wrong. It was a friend from college. You don't know her. Then give me her number. She set the spoon down. Why are you doing this? I came back. I explained. I thought we were moving forward. You gave me a bullet point script, Jessica. You rehearsed it. She stared at me. Her jaw tightened. Who told you that? I saw you at the coffee shop. With him, she didn't deny it. She just stood there, hands at her sides, the sauce starting to burn. His name is Mark, she said quietly, and I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like a husband who wants the truth, like a man who can't handle that his wife has a life outside of him. I felt a crack in my chest, not pain, not anger, just the sound of something breaking that I knew could never be fixed. I can handle truth, I said. I can't handle lies dressed up as trust. She didn't respond. She turned back to the stove and scraped the burnt sauce into the trash. I went back to the living room, opened my laptop. I still had one more story to read. The one about the coworker who filmed her. The one where the coworker took video of her outside of work to prove she wasn't disabled. I opened the post. It was a woman, early 30s, black, living in Texas. She had chronic pain. She explained it in a way that made sense to me. Imagine living at a 6 on the pain scale every day where normal people are at a 2 or 3. Some days she was higher, some days she was blessed with a 4. She used canes on days she hit a 7 or above. She had all the paperwork filed with her job, a handicap placard on her car, the whole system. She worked 2 jobs. Her main one was full-time and her part-time was as an assistant coordinator for a team she actually liked. Her boss, Amy, was great. Her coworker, Casey, though, that was the problem. Casey wanted a promotion. Everyone knew it. OOP didn't want it. She just wanted to do her job, pad her savings, and stay busy. But Casey saw her as a threat. When OOP was moved to a new location closer to home, Casey started watching her. They were the same position, assistant coordinators to Amy, but Casey had seniority, and she was bitter. The first incident was small. OOP had a bad pain day, a 7 or 8. She used her cane at work. Casey made a comment, "Oh, you're using the cane today, must be really bad," sarcastic. OOP ignored it. Then a few days later, OOP had a good day, a rare 4. She walked in without the cane, feeling almost normal. Casey stared at her from her desk. OOP said hello. Casey didn't respond. Then the flyers started appearing. Someone put a note on OOP's car windshield. Faking disability for parking privileges is a crime. She didn't see who did it. She took a photo, reported it to security, but nothing came of it. She thought it was a random jerk. Then Casey started talking about her in meetings. Passive-aggressive comments about people who abuse the system, and some people act disabled when it's convenient. OOP's boss, Amy, shut it down once, but Casey kept doing it. OOP went to HR. HR said they'd talked to Casey, but Casey denied everything, said OOP was being sensitive. Then came the weekend. OOP was at a grocery store having a decent day. She was walking normally, carrying a bag, reaching for things on high shelves. She didn't feel any pain. She was smiling. She got in her car and drove home. The next day at work, Casey called her into an empty conference room. Casey had her phone out. She showed OOP a video. It was OOP in the grocery store, shot from a distance, zoomed in. The video showed her walking without a limp, laughing, reaching up. Casey said, "I just wanted to show you how you look to the rest of us. It doesn't line up with what you claim." OOP stood there. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just said, "You filmed me without my permission." Casey said, "It's a public place, that's legal, and I think this needs to go to HR. I think you've been lying about your disability." OOP walked out. She went to Amy. Amy was horrified. She said, "I'll handle this." She went to HR with OOP. HR said they'd investigate, but Casey had already sent the video to their department email chain with a subject line, "Evidence of fraud." The whole team saw it. OOP was humiliated. She called the police. She wanted to file a stalking complaint. The officer listened but said because it was a single incident and it was in a public place, they couldn't do much. "You can file a report," he said, "but it's a civil matter. Take it up with your employer." She filed the report anyway. She knew it wouldn't go anywhere. Then things escalated. Casey started parking near OOP's car. She'd wait in the lot. She'd follow her after work. OOP started taking different routes home. She told Amy. Amy said she'd talk to security, but Casey had been there longer. Casey knew everyone, and Casey was white. OOP was black in Texas. She didn't say that out loud, but she knew the math. A few days later, OOP's landlord called. Someone had filed a complaint about her handicap placard, said it might be fraudulent. The landlord said, "I just want to confirm you have a valid medical condition." OOP sent him her doctor's letter. She felt violated all over again. She updated Reddit after the HR investigation concluded. Casey was put on administrative leave pending a full investigation into the stalking and harassment, but OOP didn't trust it. She knew Casey would be back. She knew she'd have to work with her again. She said she was applying for other jobs. She said she was tired of proving she was in pain. I closed the laptop. Jessica was in the bedroom now. I could hear her drawers opening and closing. She was packing. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't go to her. I sat in the dark living room and thought about that woman in Texas, how she had to fight to be believed, how someone took her worst moment and used it against her. I thought about Casey, the coworker who thought she was exposing a fraud. I thought about how easy it was to twist someone's truth into a lie. Jessica came out with a duffel bag. She stood in the hallway light. "I'm going to stay at my mom's for a few days," she said. "I think we need space." I didn't respond. She waited. Then she said, "I didn't cheat on you if that's what you're thinking. Mark is just a friend, but you clearly don't trust me and I can't live like that." I looked at her. "You want me to trust you? Then start with the truth, not the script, the real story." She shook her head. "I already told you I needed a weekend to myself. I turned off my location because I knew you'd track me. That's not trust, that's surveillance. You lied about where you were." "I lied to avoid a fight. I'm sorry. But I'm not going to stand here and defend myself for wanting one weekend where I wasn't being watched." She walked out. The door closed. The lock clicked. I sat there for a long time. The apartment was quiet. The sauce was burnt. The roommate's story about the drug-dealing boyfriend, the disabled woman's story about her stalker coworker, both of them ended with someone walking away. One with relief, one with exhaustion. I didn't know which one I was feeling. I picked up my phone. I texted her, "I want to talk when you're ready, not about the weekend, about us." She replied 2 hours later, "Okay, give me a few days." I went to bed alone. The bed smelled like her. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every story I'd read that night. The wife who tuned out the husband's fantasies, the roommate who caught the boyfriend with a knife, the woman whose own body was videotaped as evidence against her, and Jessica who turned off her location and came home with a story every hour. I didn't know which one was real, but I knew one thing for certain: the bullet-pointed script was gone. Now we had the unsolved chapter, and I was terrified to write the next line. I couldn't sleep after that. The apartment felt hollow without Jessica's footsteps, without the hum of the TV she always left on. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the stories still spinning in my head. I grabbed my phone again. One more story. I scrolled through my saved bookmarks and found the one about the roommate and her boyfriend who just wouldn't stop showering. I opened it. It was a woman, 21, living in a two-bedroom flat with a roommate, 22. They'd been together a little over a year. Nothing special, just two girls splitting rent and keeping out of each other's way. No drama until the roommate started dating a guy, 24, about 6 months ago. At first, he was around once or twice a week. That was normal, then it became 5 or 6 nights a week. Then entire weeks straight. He wasn't on the lease, didn't pay rent, didn't buy groceries, didn't contribute a single thing. The roommate never said anything, she just let it happen. And the worst part, the part that made my jaw clench, was the showering. The guy showered twice a day minimum, sometimes more, and every single time he used her stuff. Her shampoo, conditioner, face wash, razor, even her deodorant, she noticed. Of course she noticed. She moved all her toiletries into her room and carried them back and forth like she was at summer camp. She mentioned it to her roommate once gently, and the roommate just shrugged and said he probably didn't realize. She let it slide for weeks, but then she got fed up. One night she came home from work exhausted and found him in the bathroom again, the water running, her expensive face wash bottle on the edge of the sink. She knocked on the door. He opened it, towel around his waist, steam pouring out. She said, "Can you please use your own stuff? I'm tired of replacing mine." He just smiled and said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know." But he kept doing it. 2 days later, she sat her roommate down. She said, "Look, I don't want to start drama, but your boyfriend showers here constantly, uses my stuff, and doesn't contribute anything. If he at least bought his own products, I'd be fine, but I'm not a free hotel." The roommate got defensive. She said, "He's my boyfriend. He's here because I want him here, and you're being controlling." The fight escalated. The roommate accused her of being jealous, of being petty over a bottle of shampoo. She said, "If it bothers you that much, just put your stuff in your room," which she already did. But the boyfriend still opened her cabinets, still used her towels, still helped himself to her razors. Razors, sharing razors, that's how you catch something. She posted on Reddit asking if she was the asshole. Most people said no. Some said she should talk to the landlord, some said to move out. But the real story came out in the updates. A week after she posted, she came home early from work. She heard voices in the living room, then the sound of the door opening. She stepped inside and saw the boyfriend standing in the hallway holding a knife, not threatening her, just holding it. He had a small bag on the table, white powder. She froze. Her roommate came out of the bedroom and said, "Oh, you're home early." She had bloodshot eyes. The boyfriend quickly put the knife down and stuffed the bag into his pocket. He said, "We were just cutting open a package." She didn't buy it. She went to her room and locked the door. She called her mom. Her mom said, "Get out of there tonight." She packed a bag and went to a friend's place. The next morning, she texted her roommate, "I'm not coming back until he's gone. I saw the knife and the powder." "Stupid." The roommate responded, "You're overreacting. It's just a little weed." She knew it wasn't weed. She called the landlord and explained the situation: the boyfriend not on the lease, the drug activity, the knife. The landlord said he'd start eviction proceedings against the roommate for violating the lease. She said she'd move out anyway. She couldn't live there anymore. A few days later, the roommate called her, crying. She said the boyfriend had been arrested. He was dealing. He had a record. She said, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He told me he was just helping a friend." She felt bad for her roommate, but she wasn't surprised. Everyone in that guy's life had cut him off for a reason. The roommate finally saw it. The final update said she moved into a new apartment, a studio, all by herself. She said she learned to trust her gut. She said she should have stood up for herself earlier. She ended with, "I'm safe now. My new roommate is a cat." I put the phone down. That story had a happy ending, a messy one but positive. The girl got out. She found a safe place. The boyfriend was gone. I thought about Jessica, about the weekend she turned off her location, about the stories she told, each one a bullet point that didn't add up. I wanted to believe she was telling the truth. I wanted to believe she just needed space. But the pattern, the lies, the new clothes, the calls from Mark, it wasn't just space, it was something else. I didn't know if I was like that girl in Texas being gaslit by a coworker who filmed her without permission, or if I was like the roommate with the drug dealer boyfriend, blind to what was right in front of me. Or if I was just a jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife wanting one weekend alone. I decided to stop guessing. I texted her again, "I love you, I'm sorry for the tracking, but I need the whole truth, not the script. When you're ready." I waited. An hour later, she replied, "I'll come home tomorrow, we'll talk." I put the phone on the nightstand. I didn't sleep, but I closed my eyes. The stories from tonight, the disabled woman, the roommate with the shower boyfriend, my own story, they all had one thing in common. Someone had to decide when the unsolved chapter ended. Tomorrow, I'd write mine.